This story before sleep, so it must be slowly. The rust-colored rain. The rain on Mars had a sound, but it wasn't the sound of water. It was a soft, persistent hiss, the sound of a million tiny chemical reactions happening all at once. For 2 years, it had been the planet's only song, a constant whisper against the triple-paned polymer of the biodome at Perseverance Point. The drizzle wasn't born from clouds in the traditional sense, but from high-altitude chemical dispersers, a man-made alchemical concoction designed to break down the toxic perchlorates in the Martian regolith and slowly, painstakingly prepare the soil for life. To Elara Vance, the sound was a lullaby of progress, but it was also the sound of her isolation. She stood in the observation deck of HabPod 7, looking out at the landscape her parents were supposed to help build. Outside, it was a world of mud. Not the rich, dark brown mud of Earth, but a deep rust-colored sludge that clung to everything. The once sharp edges of the colony's external machinery were blurred by it. The crawlers and sensor arrays perpetually caked in the ochre grime. The sky was a permanent bruised purple ceiling, a chemical haze that promised no dawn, no dusk, only a monotonous twilight. A small chime drew her attention to the comms panel. A buffered message sent 8 minutes ago from a clinic in New Pasadena, Earth, a lifetime away. She touched the screen and a hologram of her parents flickered to life. They were sitting together, looking frail. The vibrancy she remembered was replaced by a weary translucence. Her father, Dr. Elara Vance, the brilliant botanist who had designed the very extremophile lichens she monitored, could no longer hold his head steady. Her mother, Lena, the structural engineer who had blueprinted this very dome, had a tremor in her hands that made her teacup rattle. Lunar degenerative syndrome, a cruel twist of fate, diagnosed just 6 months before the launch of the Ares Endeavour, a disease that attacked the nervous system, making the high-G launch and the rigors of Martian life an impossible dream. "Hi, sweet pea." Her father's voice was a readier version of its former self. "We saw your latest atmospheric report. Nitrogen fixation is up 0.03%. Your mother says that's within expected parameters, but I think you're coaxing the planet along." "Don't listen to him," Lena said, her smile gentle but strained. "We're proud of you, Elara. You're living it, for all of us." The message ended. 8 minutes for their words to cross the void. 8 minutes for her reply to begin its journey back. A 16-minute conversation, a ghost-like dialogue with the living. She typed her reply, keeping her tone bright, describing the progress of lichen colony B7 and a funny mishap in the hydroponics lab. She never mentioned the oppressive silence of her living quarters or the ache of walking on the red soil they had dreamed of their entire lives. She was their proxy, their legacy, and legacies weren't allowed to complain. Her own work was a direct extension of theirs. As a geohydrogeology technician, her job was the rain. Every day she suited up and took a crawler out to the remote sensor arrays, collecting samples of the drizzle, analyzing its pH, its catalytic efficiency, its slow transformative effect on the soil. She was a planet's first weatherman, reading the forecast of a world being born. The next morning, the hiss of the rain was slightly louder, a shift in the dispersal schedule. She pulled on the inner lining of her EVA suit, the familiar ritual a comfort. Out in the airlock, the heavy metallic outer suit waited. It smelled of ozone and recycled air. As the inner door sealed and the Martian atmosphere was slowly bled in, she felt the familiar sense of stepping into another reality. Outside, the air was thin and bitingly cold, and carried the sharp metallic scent of the drizzle. Her suit's filters handled it, but she could still taste it in her mind. She climbed into the hulking form of the badger, a six-wheeled atmospheric crawler, and began the 2-hour journey to Array Gamma. The landscape was hypnotic in its monotony. Red mud, sculpted by the endless drizzle, stretched to a horizon that was always shrouded in mist. This was her world, a landscape of raw potential, a canvas awaiting its first brushstroke of green. She often felt like the only person on the planet, the rumble of the badger the only proof of human existence. At Array Gamma, a lonely spire of antennas and sensors bristling from a concrete plinth, she went about her work. She took the soil samples, the mud sucking at her boots. She extracted the rain collectors, replacing the full vials with sterile ones. Everything was routine, until it wasn't. While running a diagnostic on the array's structural integrity center,
"Get her a suit," Rostova commanded, "and find me the best tether operator we have. Now." As she was being rushed to the EVA prep room, she caught Dr. Tanaka's eye. He gave her a single, solemn nod, a nod of apology and of respect. 10 minutes later, Elara stood in the airlock, a specialized toolkit magnetized to her belt and a canister of emergency sealant on her back. The hissing of the rain outside the main door sounded like a hungry beast. She was no longer just her parents' legacy. She was the last, best hope of Perseverance Point. She took a deep breath, the recycled air smelling of ozone and fear, and gave the signal. The outer airlock door began to grind open, a metallic groan against the storm's fury. Elara was hit by a wall of sound and chaos. The hiss of the rain was a roar out here, and the wind whipped the corrosive drizzle into a blinding, rust-colored vortex. Her helmet's floodlights barely penetrated the gloom, illuminating a maelstrom of red mist and mud. "Tether locked. I have you, Vance," a calm voice crackled in her ear. Jax, her tether operator, her lifeline. "Mind your step. The ground is unstable. Proceed to the conduit entrance, 30 meters, bearing 2905. Every step was a battle. The Martian sludge, thicker and slicker than mud had any right to be, sucked at her boots, trying to pull her down. The wind pushed against her, a physical force threatening to throw her off balance. Her suit's integrated AI kept a running commentary. "Warning, external temperature, minus 80 degrees Celsius. Warning, atmospheric chemical concentration at 210%. Outer suit layer corrosion at 4%. She ignored it, focusing on Jax's voice and the faint outline of the communications hub looming out of the mist. It was a wounded giant, and she could feel its groans through the soles of her boots. As she neared the base, a piece of shielding torn loose by the storm slammed into the ground just meters away, showering her with debris. "Vance, you okay?" Jax's voice was sharp. "I'm fine," she grunted, her heart hammering. "Almost there." The entrance to Maintenance Conduit 4C was a dark, menacing rectangle, barely wider than her shoulders. A place no human was ever meant to enter during a storm like this. It was the stuff of nightmares. She took a deep breath, the recycled air tasting metallic. "I'm at the entrance, going in." "Copy that. I'm feeding you slack. You're on your own from here. Just keep talking to me," Jax said. The moment she slid into the conduit, the roar of the storm was replaced by a new set of terrifying sounds. The creak and groan of tortured metal, the scraping of her suit against the narrow walls, and the amplified sound of her own ragged breathing. Her helmet's floodlights barely penetrated the gloom, illuminating a maelstrom of red mist and mud. 10 meters in, a buckled support strut blocked her path. Panic flared in her throat. The opening was too small. "Jax, I've got a blockage. Strut C9 has failed. I don't think I can get through." "Stay calm, Vance. What do you see?" She scanned the area, her mind racing. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory from a long-ago lesson over a holographic blueprint. "Every system has a bypass, Elara. You just have to find it."
She saw it then, a small junction box for the conduit's power systems. If she could disconnect the main cable, she could just barely squeeze behind the strut. "I have an idea," she said, her voice tight with concentration. Working with fumbling gloved fingers, she uncoupled the heavy cable. The conduit's emergency lights flickered and died, plunging her into absolute darkness, save for her helmet beams. She pushed herself into the gap, her suit scraping, every muscle straining. For a terrifying moment, she was wedged, stuck between the wall and the buckled metal. She pushed harder, a raw cry escaping her lips, and then she was through. She reconnected the cable and pushed onward. Finally, her scanner lit up. The breach. It was a spiderweb of hairline fractures around a primary weld joint, an angry, glowing wound in the metal. The hissing was louder here, a venomous whisper of failure. The damage was extensive, worse than the models had predicted. Warming, outer suit layer corrosion at 12%. Structural integrity is degrading. Despair washed over her. The canister of sealant felt pitifully small. She thought of her parents' frail forms in the hologram. She had failed them. Their dream, this entire world would die here in this dark, forgotten tunnel. Then another memory surfaced. Her mother tracing a line on the schematic with her finger. "And this," she said, tapping a seemingly insignificant